Thank you so much, Clifton, for your time with the Indian Sun. And you are, reputed CPIM leader, lawyer, activist. CPIML, sorry, I should say
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
My bad. Uh,
Uh,
I want to start with a question on the Ecosocialism 2020 conference in Melbourne, in which you are speaking. What are the key messages or ideas that you aim to convey?
um, I mean, there's just so many of it. I think at this point in time,
Yeah.
one of the, perhaps if one were to understand, the real big crisis, which of course is linked with the crisis of capitalism,
Mhm.
is the entire rightward shift that one is seeing across the globe. So at various types of authoritarian, dictatorial kind of regimes coming to power in probably all of the continents. And that, of course, coming again in defense of capitalism, in defense of even, to try and extricate it from the crisis that capitalism is in today. And what it also means is that then the entire kind of impact that this has on the environment, the kind of extractive kind of policies that come with capitalism, obviously get heightened. So I would say, this thing of climate change that we're talking about, I don't see how one can divorce this either from the crisis of capitalism and the rise of the of right-wing regimes across the country. So I would say, this is probably one of the that connection. I think is something that all of us need to really acknowledge if we want to fight climate change, and also if we want to fight this kind of a right-wing fascist trend that we're seeing across the globe. Secondly, I would think, the what I would really would like to speak about are the necessities of solidarities across the board. And these solidarities, I think, it can't be merely through statements or just expressions in that sense. We really need to find ways in which we can combat the kind of global crisis that we all are facing today. In a sense where solidarity means walking together, solidarity means struggling together, solidarity also means standing up and protecting the earth, and of course protecting the basic rights of human beings across the globe. So these I would imagine are the two primary thoughts that come to my mind.
So, but when you look at Australia, which is like sits somewhere in the middle, what kind of support do you expect from the leaders, activists, and communities here in promoting this view?
Yeah, I would imagine, if you were to look at especially what happened just probably a month ago when the Prime Minister of India visited Australia, and you had the political regime in Australia backing to the hill, backing him completely. In fact, with no questions asked whatsoever. Now, I would say that Australians need to hold their government accountable. The accountability is not only insofar as what the policies may be of the Australian government, the domestic policies, but its foreign policies, the kind of regimes that it will truck with, the kind of regimes that it will try to offer some kind of some kind of shelter or affirm. I think these are extremely important questions that Australians need to ask. And really, I don't think that's just a question of solidarity. I think that's a question of taking to task elected governments and ensuring that that they are not supporting right-wing regimes across the country. That so I think it's really more than standing up or more than supporting. I would say it's more in defense of Australian people's rights. That's what is necessary today.
But then, what are your hopes and sort of expectations from the Eurosocialism 2023 meet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very important that we have conversations across the board. We have to, otherwise, all of us, of course, given the kind of situations that we are all coming from, the kind of activism that all of us are in, it's very easy to get in that sense, froggled. And I would imagine there's something like this, these conversations across continents, these conversations across even some amount of, differences in political approaches, even in, maybe in ideologies. I would always imagine that is something that helps us in even sharpening our own, our own understanding and analysis, as it were. But beyond that, I think if we actually understand this to be a global crisis, then the response has to be a global response. So how is it that we are going to form that kind of a global alliance of progressive thought, which can actually be a counterforce to this? At this point, the hegemonic nature of this, the hegemonic nature that we are up against, it almost seems invincible. But the fact is that nothing is invincible, as history has always taught us that. But I think we need to now find ways of building that connect, building these kind of, movements across the globe, coordinated, which, like I said, in defense of the earth and of people. And that's something that I'm hoping that you'll have over there.
So then, like, how do you think that can be like effectively communicated and embraced by wider audience, say policy makers or even the public?
Yeah, see, the way I would imagine, I'm sure that this is a event that people will be keen in. At least the progressive sections definitely will probably keep an eye out on this. And like all other discussions that we have, obviously this is bound to influence the thought process of people. So I'm imagining that that's really the kind of role that it plays. And of course, the kind of conversations that one can have even around this conference. I mean, I really don't see myself ever coming to Australia, if not for this. I'm definitely not going to be traveling there, for pleasure. But
It's
this
too
is,
long.
I think,
It's
something
too long a flight as well.
it's too long. There's too much of work to be done. All of us are extremely busy in terms of, where we all are. But what this also means, you just get that little bit of time off, I would imagine, to share your thoughts. Like I'm quite excited to listen to some of the other speakers as well, in terms of, because it's always interesting. It's one thing to sit and read about, what's happening in other countries in terms of, the kind of fights that people are putting up. I think it's a very different thing to actually, listen to people, have that kind of interaction with them. So, for instance, I think there's one section on West Papua. I'm really, really looking forward to learning from that session as well.
Yeah. Well, I hope you have a very fruitful visit and an outcome from this. Now, I'm very keen to jump onto the question of India now.
Yeah.
I've seen a few of your interviews. So as a leader and activist, what is your assessment of the current Modi government in India in terms of its impact on social justice, human rights, and democratic values?
Yeah. Interestingly, I think almost similar question was posed to him in the White House.
Okay.
In the sense of, what is the situation of human rights that some groups have. And the most interesting thing is that in his response, he had to resort to the Constitution. I think the Constitution, which is much maligned, which is sought to be dismantled by this particular political regime, is what is run to for in defense, at least in the White House. But I've spoken about this several times, and from our party, we have our own understanding of the kind of situation that is evolving in India is very clear. That this cannot but be characterized as as fascism that is unfolding in India, which means that the threats are really very, very high, and that is something that can only be countered by a very, very large people's movement. Of course, elections will come and go, and electoral defeats and successes have their own relevance. There's no two ways about it. But to believe that defeating this particular force electorally is sufficient is something that, we think is flawed. Because you're looking at, if you look at the various features of this particular regime, you'll find there's authoritarianism, there's totalitarianism, there's this entire military kind of worship, the personality cult, the complete dismantling of any notion of a free media, and on the contrary, mainstream media actually becoming propagandists, almost like in Hitler's times you had the Durchstürmer, and the kind of role that they played. So if you look at the various features of this particular regime, now put together, they definitely, constitute an Indian brand of fascism. That is really how we're seeing. And in that kind of a situation, I think talking about human rights, is absolutely necessary. But you can also understand how difficult it is, in terms of the abuse of draconian criminal laws to jail human rights activists. These are things that are happening. But of course, one thing that's always said to me is that now you are speaking about this and you have the freedom to speak about it. And, you'll probably even, reach Australia and speak about this. And so how can you even say, that say freedom of speech and expression, right to dissent, resistance is being curbed? I don't think, it's as simple as that. To imagine that, that there's going to be a replay of the final solution that Hitler implemented, I think is foolhardy. That's fascism in various points in time is going to take on have on very different features. And then you also have the country specific peculiarities, which will determine its features. So for instance, in the Indian context, the caste system is something that is extremely unique. So needless to add, if you were to understand any kind of a fascist attack, the element around caste is something that will be a peculiarity that you will only find in India. So I think, a lot of people are trying to measure what's happening in India with the kind of classical fascism of the 1920s and 30s of Europe. And that, I think, is a fundamental error, that is being made. The point is that even today, people speaking out, of course, elections are held. There are elections in which even the BJP suffers electoral defeats. But the overall situation is something that is absolutely, is something that we have to be very, very concerned about. And it can very easily slide into some altogether alarming kind of a situation.
So it sounds like a bit of a doom and gloom, isn't it? When you say this. So what are really the hopes and expectations for the future? In terms of India.
No, not at all. I don't think, any kind of an objective analysis is what it is. It's just an objective analysis of a particular situation. But the point is that there is a tradition of resistance in this country which is centuries old. It is not just something, that is developed recently. You had these kind of hegemonic kind of systems, whether it is caste, whether it's patriarchy, and these are systems against which you've had, huge revolts even throughout the history of our country. So even now, when you have this kind of a fascist kind of an assault, you also have an extremely remarkable pushback, a kind of fight from the people. So if you were to look at, probably two important examples that I would like to, cite. Firstly is when the Modi government introduced an amendment to the citizenship law and basically giving it a religious color, something that did not exist hitherto. The citizenship is dehors, any caste, any creed, any religion, any gender, etc. But this entire attempt to communalize even citizenship, an extremely remarkable movement grew all over the country. The anti-CA protests, as they're commonly known, led primarily by Muslim women, which literally halted the government in its tracks. And if it weren't for the COVID and the COVID lockdown that happened at that time, March 2020, the government was literally with its backs against the wall by the kind of concerted nationwide protest that took place. Similarly, I would say if you look at the farmers' protests, yes, when the three farm laws, anti-farmer laws that the Modi government tried to bring into force, which basically meant the corporatization of the entire agricultural sector. You had lakhs of farmers literally barricading the borders of Delhi for an entire year, building up townships on an highway for an entire year, and saying that until the government withdraws those particular laws, we are not going to go back. And they compelled the Modi government to actually withdraw those laws. So if you look at these struggles, if you look at the struggles, say, of the students in various universities across the country, if you look at the struggles of the workers, against the central laws that the central government, that the union government is trying to bring in, which basically, which basically take away from workers whatever rights that they've had over the last 150 years. Remarkable struggles from the workers, which have forced the government to not implement those laws even now. So I don't think it's a doomsday. In fact, I'm an eternal optimist in that sense. That
Mm.
these are, you go through challenging times in history, and
Yeah.
every single challenging time there is going to be a resistance. There will be oppression. There will be martyrdom. There will be losses, but
Mm.
ultimately people will prevail.
Yeah, but I suppose, yeah, you're right. But I suppose this has to be, again, apart from these few one, two, cases, there has to be a broader role, for civil societies and activists, to hold the government accountable, isn't it? And right now, I suppose we're slowly building that momentum up. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. See, something that we've been saying as a party is in the electoral arena, you need oppositional unity to defeat the BJP. So when our party had its 11th Congress earlier this year in February in Patna, one of the things that we did was we had an open session, an anti-fascist kind of a for conference that over there, in which we invited the various political parties to be there, which most of the major political parties attended and made a commitment, that on the electoral front, we all will come together to defeat it. And recently, those developments, there have been more developments on that. There have been a couple of meetings between major political parties which are in the opposition to try and build that kind of a unity, at least on the electoral front, which is a very, very positive development. But other than that, something that, like I said in the beginning, if fascism has to be defeated, it cannot be by a ballot paper. It will have to be on the streets. And for that, the kind of struggles that are required, again, see the struggles that I mentioned, whether it's the anti-CA struggles or the farmer protests, these are not sectoral struggles. These are struggles in which the entire country was galvanized in support of these struggles. You had civil society, trade unions, political parties, women's organizations, student organizations, everyone offering their support, solidarity, and active participation in these struggles. Very much like the restless struggles that, against sexual harassment that happened over the past 2 months in Delhi. So that entire process is obviously going to take time. Our country is a very big country with a very big population, and with each state having its own peculiar kind of politics. This is something which will take time, but I feel it is definitely going to happen.
I'd like to ask you about, your thoughts on the diaspora. I mean, you would have seen from Modi's visits abroad that there is a whole lot of jingoism going on over there. What do you think, is the role they're playing now?
Yeah, see, you'll have to give it to this regime. The BJP, and we say BJP, but basically it's the RSS. The RSS, in their last 100 years of their existence, it's an organization that was formed in 1925 with an imagination of an Hindu supremacist kind of a nation. The Hindu Rashtra, as they call it. They've been working very hard, and one of the and all sections of society. So they have their own trade union, they have their own women's organization, their own student organization, their own indigenous people's organization. They have an organization for every section of society. They also have their own organization for the diaspora, and they've been working committedly for many decades now to build a consensus among the diaspora for their project of a Hindu Rashtra. And what you're seeing today is not just a sudden wave of support for Modi. What you're basically seeing is a culmination of that entire process, a coming together of that process over many decades of building a consensus among the diaspora for a different imagination of India. An imagination which is not based on the constitution, an imagination which is not premised on any, in that sense, constitutional values, whether it's equality, justice, liberty, or fraternity, but is premised solely on a religious and on a casteist kind of a plane. So that is the kind of euphoria that you're seeing today, and I think one needs to understand that, and I think which is why it's all the more important. And one of the things that I feel which would be useful is to also have conversations with the diaspora who don't buy into this kind of this jingoism, as you call it. They have to be organized, and they are organized. And if you look at when Prime Minister Modi went to Washington, you had the progressive sections of the diaspora also coming to the streets and protesting and raising very crucial questions, pertinent questions that the Biden government should have been raising actually. So I think the diaspora, obviously, it has a role to play. And while now the right wing thinking diaspora is obviously very, very organized over the last so many decades. I think times now for the progressive diaspora also to stand up and be counted, and I think that is also happening.
Yeah, that's true. I want to ask now to the fag end of my questions, which is coming to Manipur, which is right now in the news. I'm not so much, not so much in the sense that it's not making headlines because Modi is so silent about it. But
Yeah.
as someone committed to social justice, what are your observations and concerns regarding this ongoing violence in that state?
Yeah, I mean, see, also from our party, we've been just, we've been observing what is happening over there. We've been issuing statements. We've been calling for the state and central union government to really, clamp down on this violence that has happened over there. Our party also in in Assam, which is a neighboring state, is also quite active, and there is certain, activities that they have also taken up there to put pressure on the state and the union government. From our point of view, see, I mean, this what it appears is something to be an orchestrated riot. Otherwise, for it to continue for almost 2 months now, this kind of organized, targeted violence, where you're also seeing elected representatives from indigenous communities who are with the BJP also being assaulted, badly injured. You're also seeing, the properties, houses of elected representatives being burnt down. You've had arms being taken away from the police, so on and so forth. So the entire situation, I think, is something that it is not something that has happened by accident. And of course, there is an entire effort to try and make. So basically, what they're trying to say is that this is triggered by a high court judgment, an high court order that says that in Manipur, the Meiteis are also demanding the scheduled tribe status, which is already given to the Kukis and the Nagas. So
But
because
that,
they're
but that we know is not the genesis of the conflict, isn't it?
exactly the point exactly that I'm coming to. Our entire point is that is so reductionist. What you're actually seeing is these deep cracks that were there in Manipur's society, which are now come to the fore. This is literally like the last straw on the camel's back, the order of the High Court. It really is nothing beyond that. It cannot be that. It is not that that's the only reason why this has taken place. You have a very, there's a very determined kind of an effort over here to also disenfranchise, and an entire effort at ethnic cleansing that we're seeing in Manipur, which is very, very worrisome. And the ordinary people in Manipur are all suffering because of this violence and the kind of, and you don't even have a statement that is issued by the Prime Minister to date. You
Yeah, I
have
want to ask you that. I want to
maybe
ask why is he silent?
our see there's this running joke, this the previous prime minister was Mr. Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, when for the 10 years that Congress was in power.
He was a man
And
of
the
few
BJP used
words.
to, sorry,
He was a man of few words.
man, a few words. And so the BJP used to constantly, constantly ridicule him as being the silent man. Now we have a situation where we have a loud man who says a lot with very little to say. So you'll have your man ki baat, you will have your, grandiose kind of statements being made in various stadiums and so forth, but really nothing effective when something like this happens. It is really, it's a matter of great concern if the Prime Minister of a nation does not talk about, a situation where a literal ethnic cleansing is taking, people are getting killed, elected representatives are getting assaulted, more than 250 churches are burned down, more than 100 people are killed, more than 40-50,000 people are displaced from their homes and become, internal refugees. And instead, the party to which he belongs to is engaged in politicking over there. It's engaged in, the various kinds of dog whistling that you want about refugees, everything is something that they're engaging in. So I think it's a matter of great concern for the country when the Prime Minister maintains such kind of silence in a situation like this. And he's being called to task, I think, on that.
So coming to so sticking to Manipur again. So what do you think, like, civil societies and activists like yourself, what role can you play in promoting dialogue and reconciliation?
Yeah, I think, say, even across the country, especially even in educational institutions where there are a large number of students from Manipur cutting across ethnicities who are studying. There's been an attempt to engage with various other communities in dialogue to try and, find some kind of a voice of sanity, to appeal to that voice of sanity in that sense. So that is something that, of course, comrades of our organization also are engaged in that. And like I told you, in Assam, there's an entire effort to try and build a consensus among the civil society that, this is something that we need to intervene in, and we need to put pressure on the union government and the state government to ensure that, that peace prevails over there, and this madness that is unfolding, that it's put to an end. And I would imagine that there are several people who are doing this. Just the other day, there was a huge protest in the city of Patna in the state of Bihar, where various organizations and civil society organizations, political parties held a massive, massive demonstration calling for immediate, intervention so that there's a cessation to the kind of violence over there.
Last question. So, what are your hopes and expectations for the future of India's governance, particularly in terms of promoting social justice and human rights and sustainable development?
Yeah, I think the hopes are always from the people, that the people of our country have all, have the spirit of resistance, that has always existed. That is something that, one has hope from. The government that is there at this point in time, I mean, less said the better at this juncture. But I think what we really are most hopeful for are that people are standing up, and ordinary people are tired of this, of the kind of hatred, the communal hatred, and all of that, that is being spread in the country. And I think that's where the hope is from. So if there's going to be social justice and any protection of human rights, it will have to come through the movements of the people. Any right it's not the largesse of the state that one can rely upon. It is the faith that we have in people's ability to affect change, ability for ideologies such as ours, of Marxism, that can actually bring about a complete transformation in society. That's where the faith lies, and that's where the hope lies as well.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a good time in Melbourne.